I need to talk to you. Yeah, to you fellows, about your infrastructure in a small business. So small businesses, and I see quite a lot of them, have the tendency to aim quite high when it comes to infrastructure. And it's quite funny because you are small, right? So you probably have small requirements, small non-functional requirements, especially when it comes to infrastructure. And I see way too many CTOs or other people in the company who should focus on creating value, actually spending 30% of their time onto the infrastructure. So 1 out of 3 issues is very often an infrastructure issue in a small company where you should create value very fast. You shouldn't spend time on infrastructure at all. Of course, you think that, but you need infrastructure in order to work. That's true. You need infrastructure in order to work. But it doesn't mean that you need to spend 30% of your OPEX, of your operational expenses, onto infrastructure. And this is the point. You need to create value. And value is created by creating features, creating outcome, doing something of value for your clients, solving some problems. No client out there I met so far is really asking about, we need some very complex stuff at AWS, something like that. So a Kubernetes setup, and you need to be in charge of that. This is most likely something CTOs, tech-savvy people like to have because, yeah, they like it. We are all nerds and geeks, right? So we like to get our hands on those things. Get your hands off those things, please. This is not your job. Your job is to create value. If you want to do infrastructure, yeah, become a CloudOps person and go to a company where you can do that. How's about that? So there are other solutions. So before you dive deep into a complex AWS setup, GCP setup, ECS even, those kind of things, think twice, because you don't actually need that. When I tell that to other CTOs or engineering managers, or mostly the people who are in charge and get their hands on those things, they tell me, yeah, but we need to scale up to a level of 1 million concurrent users. Yeah, but maybe try to get to 1,000 of them. And then it's the discussion about next year we will grow. Yeah, you will probably have 2,000 then. Yeah, I don't want to pull people down in that moment. I just want to be a little bit more realistic. This is what I see out there. This is what I see in my own company as well. The biggest issues with scalability in reality are how to scale teams, how to scale a code base, how to scale those kind of things. This is complex. How to reduce the complexity, querying data, making sure the databases aren't overloaded and stuff like this. But if it's just down to, hey, how do I host several containers for several services maybe? Let's even say 10, 20 services. You should aim for a platform as a service solution. Something which is seamlessly integrated already for you, where you actually host your containers, where you have your DNS, where you have your networking, where you have your SSL, alerting, monitoring, all those kind of things. You have that already in place in a best practice setup. For my own story, when 5 years ago, something like that, we went from data center to cloud. So this was one of the decisions I made back then. The problem with that was, hey, there is this AWS, and AWS is great. Everyone is talking about that. We hired a specialist for that. I think it was 15K or something like that, 15K euros for a basic setup, basic best practice setup. Great, I thought, right? So let's take this best practice setup in that moment. The problem with that setup was it was so complicated that I was annoyed after day one. It was planned that we need to have a 2-week onboarding to get our containers, which are already running on a Docker Swarm service locally in a data center, onto AWS. 2 weeks! Hell, think about that. The opportunity costs, CTO, engineering people involved, for just a business-to-business application or several of those. This is too much. Sorry to say that. This is too much, and this is not smart. I really pushed on for something different, and I remember my senior engineers were pretty mad at me that I'm basically shifting my mind. But in reality, I found a PaaS solution back then. I will write about that in the coming posts and videos, and we'll talk about that. And since then, we're using it. A PaaS solution, which is taking everything of you. So you are only using that platform. So this is DevOps by definition. This is how you should do this. Developers and operations in one team. Every developer can handle the infrastructure and you are still agnostic with Docker, you still have a Kubernetes under the hood and all this kind of stuff. So I really appreciate that. This was a lifesaver for the company, in my opinion. It saved us so much money. I really mean that, so much money. Literally, so much money. And I'm not really saying cloud spend, yeah? The cloud spend is lower as well, but I mean OpEx. We don't have an expensive person there who is costing a lot of money, and the most experienced person, they care about development and creation of value. The value stream is so much more important than infrastructure. No client is providing you any more money because you're going into a more expensive environment to host stuff in. This is what you need to learn, right? Clients paying for the value, for the product you create. They don't care where you host it. So, of course, on some point in time, you will have other requirements where you need to fulfill in order to satisfy your users, user numbers, maybe, edge functionality, multiple regions, those kind of things. But first of all, get to this point. Try to get there. This will probably take quite a lot of time, and make sure you get there by reducing the infrastructure cost, the OpEx for infrastructure and operations, to a bare minimum. Nothing more, nothing less. And for a typical application, just some real talk, for a typical application, let's say 5 containers, 2 or 3 replicas each, a Postgres database with a read-only node attached to that, a Redis server, all this with everything around that, you are under 1k euros in cloud spend for an application. Way under that, right? And you could even, then host the next one for just several $100 more. And you don't have to manage any Kubernetes. You don't have to manage those things. You just have a Docker Compose-like file and you just use it. I think a developer today should be able to use Docker Compose. And when you can use Docker Compose, you can use this infrastructure. No CTO needs to put their hands on this stuff. This should be the goal. Focus on value, guys. Focus, please, on value. I see way too many small companies where the CTO is sitting there in the evenings fixing infrastructure problems and thinking, hey, I'm a great person. I can do those things. I can handle AWS. Again, this is not your job. This is amateur thinking. This is just a hobby in that moment. Don't make a hobby you like to have a problem of your company. This is about responsibility and ownership. So please respect that. Think about that. It's in your own interest. And stay tuned. Hit like and subscribe. And make sure you follow when I tell you which platform we use and why in a deep dive. Have a nice day, fellows. Goodbye then.